Hello and welcome to Dice Punks, a tabletop role-playing podcast where we focus on playing full campaigns and less well-known systems. This week in episode 44, our Nobilis confront treachery incarnate. Hello and welcome. I'm Adam, your friendly neighborhood game master, and joining me are...
Hi, I'm Drew, and I'll be playing Leorian Cathar, Viscount of Tempo, in the vicissitudes of time music.
I'm Robin, and I'll be playing the literally heartless, figurative heartthrob Lyssa Crate, Career's Queen, now bereft of Forge and Darkness.
And I will be playing Romnet, the Duke of Murder, who used to be Sacrifice as well.
And you are Des.
Allegedly.
I thought that was well established, even if I didn't have to say it.
That's fair. I just am not going to be able to let Protocol go.
Fair.
In fairness, this would be a weird first episode for someone to tune into, but yes.
I don't expect
hello,
it.
welcome to you who are new here at ZomboCom.
And
We
bless your
appreciate
heart.
you. Extremely weird listener. We welcome you with open arms. Please, enjoy.
Yeah, the one day eventual person who tunes into episode 44 first, that was Des.
I think that we've now firmly established this, so let us move on.
Indeed. So we're gonna first get our character stat growth and bonus XP roll from Romnet. So go ahead and do that roll.
Pair of eights.
All right. This is one of those what are they? Pumice that you use like in the bath? The rock that floats?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This experience point is made of pumice.
Exfoliating.
And
I was about to say the same thing. Great for those calluses that are on your feet.
and
My experience is now passed beyond. Nice.
Ooh. Have we any character stat growth this time?
Yes.
Do tell.
I have accrued 7 mortal XP points. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to spend 1 to give myself a die and sense eerie. And then I'm going to spend another die to promote that to an expert die. And then I'm going to spend 5 additional points to promote that to a master die. So Lyssa has acquired some sense.
For those listening along at home and who are therefore unable to see Adam on video here, he was keeping tally with just adding fingers in the background.
I hope this causes the listeners to picture me growing extra fingers.
Yeah, he was counting that all in one hand. I'm not sure how that happened. His thumb
We need
also
more
became
alcohol,
abnormally
dear
long.
listeners.
Some of the fingers didn't look like his, which was interesting.
Yeah. They were different
Well,
colors.
they have to come from somewhere.
One had like a really nice nail on it, like beautiful polish.
Yeah.
Well, excellent. And I like this, right? Because we're at a transition point for these characters, as we'll get to in just a moment with the recap.
Yes, we may be about to die.
Having
Transition to
that
the
too. It would
Again,
be an interesting thing to learn about this world.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm moderately
But I'm
terrified.
getting ahead of the recap now.
Indeed. But yeah, as the recap will reveal, Lyssa and Romnet have recently found a new employer, shall we say? So
Had our hearts
adding
eaten
something
in the marketplace.
Yeah. Having new Erie makes actually a lot of sense, even quite rapid growth there. So yeah, we'll see what comes there in just a moment. But first, Was there any other character growth? I don't think I heard anybody say anything. So if not, the recap this week comes from Romnet.
Debating, but I think I will let things sit. So, in the wake of Nyx's departure, after a first round of negotiation, Dosk had retrieved Imbi, and Apatia stated that she wanted to no longer be Nyx's, and that she did not care if she lived, because for so long as she was Nyx's, she would not be able to do other than as her employer required of her, up to and including fighting us. We spoke with Dosk, Lissa spoke with Tohil by prayer-a-phone. And eventually everyone left the heart of Bor. And around that point, Nyx came back, appearing as a gravity well in the sky, and she and Lissa engaged in colloquy where Lissa expressed pity for being inexorably and permanently drawn toward the throne in a way that must have been utterly deranging for the goddess of sensation. I told Nyx that I did not pity her, and invited Celiand into Bor to assist when Nyx started taking steps. Celiand appeared and undid Nyx, it seemed. At a minimum, she was no longer a present threat. And there came a discussion of what to do with Nyx's Nobilis. Obviously, since Nyx was no longer in the picture, preserving their lives was a matter of temporal urgency. Celiand stated that she ought to be the one to take over their employ, but Lissa refused for want of consent, and therefore Celiand took her leave. There was a discussion of the Red Tooth Right with Tohil as to what might happen to a Nobilis if an Imperator were the one to consume the heart. And round about that time, Lissa and I went unconscious, to put it gently, and in great pain. We spent some time in that pain, high amplitude and unknown duration. We returned to consciousness, unable to sit up or even speak more than in groans. And Fewa appeared eventually. She revived us. Leorian was not around. It seemed he had been sent elsewhere. It turned out that something had likely happened to Mott. Fewa herself had been attempting to connect with Cirtha and found Celiand there, and they entered into a conflict which I interrupted by requesting her presence. Fewa stated that she had additionally learned another domain of Celiand's, at which point the goddess of truth and beauty and betrayal, returned to announce that last.
Indeed, and that is precisely where we left off with the sort of plurality of our, sort of named and active characters in Bor facing Celiand and Leorian near a seaside cliff in Nema. And that's actually where we're going to start here. In I guess what I'm going to term binge TV fashion, is deferring our cliffhanger a little bit. So, Leorian, quick refresher. You and your sister Firagi have been having this conversation. You are on this, cliff top in Nema, looking sort of down over the ocean, discussing your role as a demigod and the precise appearance of a hypothetical statue of Dusk.
I've unhelpfully said that a blank space would probably be the most devoted of devotions. But at her insistence, I've begun describing a statue that, while it may not do anything, would certainly make the practitioner feel better. The beard, I say, would really give a sculptor something to sink his teeth into, the same way a musician likes to play difficult parts, a sculptor likes to sculpt beards. And it's very important. 2 different kinds of stone, perhaps. Patterning the gloves should not be the same. That's very important if we're deciding that any of this is important.
And, just to set the scene a little bit in our listeners' minds, it's overcast, sort of afternoon shading into evening, wind off of the ocean. The ocean levels are higher up the cliff than you've ever seen them before, and Firagi had said that had just kind of been gradually happening lately. The 2 of you have been chatting, up here as you sort of give this line about beards. Firagi's attention seems to have wandered a little bit from your description, perhaps not entirely surprising. Maybe even something, Leorian, you are used to when talking to your sister. And there's a moment of silence, and then she says, wouldn't, and, correct me if I'm wrong, but wouldn't no worship be sort of dedicated to the god of nothing? Like, specifically, I guess I was thinking about it, not like not worshiping the god of nothing, but not worshiping at all would kind of be a prayer or a worship of the god of nothing, right?
I suppose I've never really thought of it that way, but yes, it could perhaps be doubly useful. You see, it would not only, everything we've been talking about, statues and such, would just be taking up space, I suppose, mostly so that people aren't worshiping any of the other gods. So to dedicate oneself to simply nothing, yeah, that would be a form of devotion.
She nods a little bit and she says, I'm just thinking, if I'm overstepping or anything, let me know, but I guess I want to be able to do something. And it's, seems like it's hard for us mere mortals to do much here, but well, your merely mortal family are troopers, musicians, players. We have the ability to spread news and ideas further and wider and faster than most people. Especially, and she kind of looks at you a little sideways, if we had some sort of divine help. So, if, for instance, more people knew that there was like a high-stakes gods war going on, that might incline them to not be too fond of the idea of prayer.
You're brilliant. You know that, but it's nonetheless edifying for me to say it. Of course. As far as divine help, what I could offer is moving from place to place unnaturally fast, or doing something but not everyone can already do, which is to trill unnaturally fast, or slowness to leave an idea in someone's mind and have it linger there. I'm continuing, and whether she's listening. Yeah.
She's kind of nodding, and she, as you wind down a little bit, she goes, "That might be the first time you've ever said I was brilliant where you weren't specifically asking me for a favor."
Well, in my defense, or I suppose exactly the opposite, you had just offered.
True, yeah. No, you're right. It's just the order is usually the other way around. Travel tempo is an interesting idea. And she sort of looks back out at the ocean and thoughtfully says, "How big a thing can you affect if the waves needed to come in faster or slower? Could you do that?"
I could. I feel in my bones that I could at that moment. I simply can't do too many such things at a throw. Big things can come at a cost. As far as the tides, though, I mean, I think I actually have some experience in that area.
She nods, and then she looks at you. And she has this look that you honestly haven't seen directed your way very often. But when something has really sort of caught Firagi's like attention, not like her sensory attention, but like she's really got it kind of, with both hands in her mind, and it's sort of a compelling idea for her. She has this particular determined, sort of very serious, almost fierce or predatory look, and she says, "Well, what about the speed with which an idea spreads?"
I have no higher compliment than brilliant, except perhaps to repeat it. Repetition in ideas, as in music, of course, breeds legitimacy. And if we could repeat, if we could spread, if we could make ourselves heard faster, yes, I think I could manage that.
She gives you a sort of, her smile shows teeth, but not a whole lot of mirth. And, you are again kind of reminded of, why she has climbed as far as she has among musicians for her not that many years. And she then unexpectedly kind of leans back over the wall in laughter. And you wouldn't say she's like dying of laughter, but she is having trouble speaking loudly enough between laughs to be heard over the wind as you sort of like lean in and try to see what the joke is. And finally she sort of takes a deep breath and pushes herself up and goes, "Does this make me your high priestess?"
I suppose it does. Yes. Yeah, again, you laughed first.
She nods, and then she assumes a posture of exaggerated seriousness. And she says, "In that case, let's talk salary." And at that moment, you hear Dosk's voice in your head go, "Whoa," and feel yourself pulled back to Boar. You have time for 2 to 5 syllables before you are gone.
I'll pay you the rate you deserve. I will mention I am the demigod of tempo. So
I was going to allow it.
Whether it's this all clear is not necessarily.
This isn't fatal. I wasn't going to make you roll a substat for how fast you can talk.
We've already established that one.
Sure.
I was only counting on my fingers for dramatic effect.
Right. There's a lot of that going around this episode.
I mean, it's not under today's notes, but I literally do have something visible on my notes page right now that says like what the note is, and then underneath it says, "To enhance," in all caps with like offset letters, drama.
Oh no.
So, that is a thing that's like a force in this universe. So we at last turn our attention back to where the action itself was brewing. As a refresher, we are on sort of the high prairie of Boar. Nothing but not quite perfectly flat, but certainly not interestingly rugged grassland in sort of a middle green-brown stretching out. A sky that isn't clear or cloudy, night or day, but doesn't have anything remarkable in it. A temperature that can best be described as unobservable. No particular weather. The air isn't still, and it's not dry or muggy. It's just in between. Variously seated, propped, stooped, standing in and around the grass here are Lissa, Romnet, Apacia, and Imbi. Standing near them is Fewa with Puff in her hood. Dosk has, as I recall, actually, the last time he was present, Lissa had rather desperately asked him to go see if he could find Varric and bring him back here. So Dosk is perhaps not in the chancel at all. He was able to confirm that Varric was alive, but beyond that, he had to go in person. And facing all of the aforementioned is Celiand. Large, resplendent, sort of liquid honey light arrayed behind her in slowly coruscating waves. She's got a look of genuine friendliness on her face, small smile, and her last words hang in the air. She has finished Fewa's statement about her domains with an admission that she is in fact the goddess of betrayal as well as others.
Out of character question for you, Adam.
Out of character answer for you.
Would it be possible to nettle betrayal because she has done exactly what we have wanted to be done for an extremely long time, namely free us from our
Interesting.
boss? That is not a betrayal, that is a furtherance of our interests.
That is a good point. I think that there is possibility there. In terms of out of character sort of pontificating, it is a sort of complicated nexus because it is not a betrayal of you exactly, but it is you betraying Mott. It may not be a coup, but you may be able to get some power out of it.
I mean, we meant Mott no harm. That he came to harm is not really something I personally care about either way.
I think that in character, though, you would be sure that Mott would see this as a betrayal.
Sure. By us, not necessarily by Celiand.
Oh, correct. You have no idea what Mott may or may not think of Celiand's actions here.
At that point, then, heart eaten and sat upon the ground, I will slow clap. and I will thank Celiand for being the tool of our emancipation.
She sort of turns to regard you. And, to remind our listeners as much as anything, Celiand seems to have something of an appreciation for Romnet's particular style of diplomacy, shall we say?
I believe the technical path is roguish outlaw or romantic outlaw charm.
Indeed, yes, and she has responded well to it in the past. So with that in mind, let's have you roll your charm plus fascinate 4 plus a master die here for being able to make this a charming to the degree that you want it to be kind of thing.
That is 2 8s becomes 3 of them.
Okay, thrites as it were.
Very different from thrice, though.
Yes. Yeah. You slow clap, and without her expression really changing from this, open and warm smile, she, looks slowly in your direction. And you thank her for emancipating you, and she graciously inclines her head as a queen granting a boon might do. And she says, well, you are most welcome. I realize, of course, that my very nature precludes the continued existence of trust between me and most that I encounter after a certain point, but I would not have you think me malicious. I am happy for your escape.
You can trust the snake to bite. You can trust the scorpion to sting the frog, even if it drowns them both.
Oh, I do like that story.
It's a very good story. It's very stupid.
That's why I like it.
Yes, it serves you well, I'm sure.
She makes sort of a non-committal nod, and she says,
but you do understand that as you are true to yourself, as you are true to your nature, you undermine yourself.
She nods and she says, in this way I am alike to all things that live.
Although pairing your betrayal with truth, the tension there seems to render you immune to hypocrisy.
I suppose that depends a lot on who you... And then there is and Leorian stumbles onto the grass kind of behind where you, Ramnet, are posted up. And sort of you catch your balance.
Handsomely, as befits a high priestess.
And whose high priestess are you, Leorian?
No one's, to my great regret. However, and then I realized something maybe afoot. Catch myself mid-sentence.
Celia looks at you with a somewhat nonplussed expression and says, welcome to the deliberations. Will we be seeing your master, do you think?
Just so everyone's on level footing here, I say, before Leorian can say word fucking one. In addition to beauty and truth, she is betrayal, and we are, you and Lissa and I, now one familia.
Oh. So...
you can also...
At that point, I probably cough wetly.
Yeah. Leorian, taking it in, Lissa, Ramnet, Apatia, and Imbi all look pretty drawn and pale. And they all have blood splotched somewhere around their chest area. Dosk is not in evidence. Thewa is standing to one side looking very stony, and Celiand has a polite smile fixed on her face during all of this. And as Ramnet speaks, you can feel sort of the truth of what Ramnet is saying kind of slotting in now that you're present here. In fact, with the exception of Thewa, Puff, and Celiand, all present here are part of one familia, which I suppose makes you the eldest child.
That's an unfamiliar feeling. but so was being an only child. So unfamiliarity and familiarity mingle, and I take it in, and I am taken aback. I say it seems at least the operation was a success. I feel instinctively for where Apatia bit me not that long ago.
Sort of having forgotten this in kind of the shifting of your circumstances, you sort of like feel up there, and you can feel where your garments are torn and crusted with some blood, and you can actually feel a difference in the texture of your skin there, but the wound itself is closed and even a little numb. It's not in pain, it has low sensation.
This may also be the time, Adam, when we need to flesh out that gift that we never statted.
Okay, so the gift that Des was mentioning there has been discussed before, but I'm uncertain as of this recording if it has made it like into an episode. It is a cost 4 gift of the domain of murder. It does sort of one-trick divinations with high penetration to divine unconventional ways to murder things that are not organisms in the traditional sense of the word. It specifically gives what the sort of knowledge of what the path to murdering something that it would otherwise be difficult to murder specifically might be. Sound like an okay description of your new gift? Do you have a name for it? I didn't think about that.
I mean, the problem is I want to make a reference to Sir Terry, but nothing is springing immediately to mind.
That is all right. We'll backfill that. Speaking of backfilling things, I had elided your intent to try to nettle Celiand, given that her betrayal pulled double duty as straightforwardly advancing your goals. And so would there have been any particular point...
At the point where she acknowledged that she did, in fact, advance our goals without betraying us, is when I would have crushed the nettle with a smile approximating hers.
Good deal. Make a real quick roll. Cool. Interesting. So, you have a choice of where this power goes. It can either restore 10 temporary miracle points distributed among your temporary miracle points as you wish, or you can regain one of your spirit.
Regain one of my spirit.
All right.
Damn.
So that pulls your spirit up to 2. Okay, so now that we've caught that up, there is this, sort of moment here where everybody sort of soaks in information about the, situation. Leorian, you are sort of reunited here. Thewa staring stonily at Celiand. Everybody else more or less where they were. Robin?
While this conversation is occurring, I'm going to pray to Mott.
Interesting. What are you going to say?
Oh, Dark Progenitor, I am still your favorite daughter. I need to know if you are still okay, and if so, I will need power to face this threat.
Interesting. Very interesting. Okay. Normally I like to have the roll before the dialogue for social roles, but sometimes I decide that a roll is necessary after the dialogue. So roll me a charm plus graces 5 dice.
Okay. I have 2 3s and 2 2s.
Okay. Well, with the widths the same, the 3s are going to be the set we go with.
Yep. Just mentioning that it was a weirdly fortuitous roll for one that I thought I had nothing in initially.
Indeed, yeah. So you direct this prayer toward Mott, and this is where my penchant for analogies gets in the way more than it helps. It feels a bit like casting a fishing line on a still pond on a foggy day. Your line disappears and you don't hear it or feel it hit, but after a moment or two you actually see the ripples faintly, sort of coming out of the fog in your direction, like it did go somewhere. Faintly, a little garbled in a way that anachronistically is not that dissimilar from like when you have kind of a crummy but extant connection over like cell or VoIP, where you sort of only get part of the voice. You hear a voice that is definitely not Mott's, but you can't identify it. It's like too kind of garbled, but you could tell just from like the affect, the wording, the pace, the timbre, the fact that it isn't like 5 voices, kind of overlapping and speaking over each other, just as the hell are, and then it's gone.
I am going to do the exact same thing again and be like, I don't know who you are, but she is killing gods. And I list the ones that she has killed so far. Interesting.
Do you know what your list is? According to Lissa, what's the body count for Celiand?
Because it's been a moment, I'm going to need a refresher on
Sure.
some of the names. But there's, of course, the Tohil's god.
That was formerly Salaban.
So Salaban, who was Thralda's god another that we mentioned that went missing?
Yes, Nareem.
So Salaban, Nareen, Nyx, and then I'm going to say Mott's name again. No, fairly confident at this point that Celiand has enlisted an attack on them.
Mm-hmm.
Cirtha as well. An attempt on Cirtha.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know. So we just know that Cirtha, like Feywa's attempt to talk with Cirtha, was intercepted by Celiand. I don't know that Celiand was not putting the charm on them, or Cirtha.
Right. We don't have information yet what Celiand was doing on that end, or whether or not she had actually met with Cirtha there before she was interrupted by Feywa.
I will.
So you list those,
and then I will introduce myself as Fury.
You have a similar kind of sensation of a very shaky reception of your prayer, but no communication comes back this time. Just kind of like the divine equivalent of 2.5 radio squelches.
But I get the sense that someone is listening.
Yeah, that it's going somewhere. It's not just howling into the void.
Yeah, and then I will end it with, be this Mott or some other god, you need to know that you're in danger and you have potential allies.
Yeah, you don't hear anything additional intelligible, but presumably whoever they are on their end, they heard something. How clear your message was, you have no way of appraising.
I'm trying to think. Is there a way of like... Well, no, Celiand would sense it if I sent out a miraculous ping, so I just invite them to seek the Furious Queen and pray.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Yeah. No, that sounds good. Message certainly sent. other particular actions in this sort of moment while Lissa is praying.
How did Celiand react to the nettle?
No visible reaction.
I reach out and see if I can hear Dosk.
Let's see. Your spirit is 4, pretty high. Give me a sense plus eerie 6 dice.
I can do that. If I can count to 6, which I think I can. That is 2 8s.
Okay. You can feel Dosk. You are standing on his body, but you can also feel his presence somewhere out there in the world. It's just you can't pin it down because, well, Boar is sort of everywhere and nowhere. So Dosk is obviously here physically and not here spiritually, but also somewhere here spiritually because of the way Boar works.
Sure. I guess if for no other reason than to buy time, that is my response to our luminous guest, which is, in a manner of speaking, that is our master is very much present.
She gives, sort of a contemplative nod and, sweeps an eye around the place, and her gaze settles on Feywa. She says, "We have to stop meeting like this, milady." And Feywa gives sort of a tight smile and says with exaggerated courtesy, "I'm afraid you have me a little bit at a disadvantage. I was merely visiting a friend. We were not expecting diplomatic visitors." And she gives a tight smile, but Puff is visible to those of you who can see her back, hackles up, tail poofing out, and teeth bared. Celiand kind of nods and says, "Well, I'm sure we'll finish our business sooner or later." She turns back to address the group at large and says, "I understand that we are likely to be at least occasional enemies. Perhaps you will have kindled some enmity and it will prove to be implacable, but I urge you to believe me when I say it doesn't have to be that way. I have no great love for this thing you've called the throne. I feel it. I cannot ignore it any more than you could choose not to breathe. Or, well, any more than a mortal could choose not to breathe, anyway. But it is not a goal of my own making. There is some common cause I think we could still make, but I will leave you to ponder your next move. By your leave."
Before you go,
she glances slowly in your direction and
a question that I recognize pits yourself against yourself. It's, as we discussed, somewhat unavoidable. Which would win out if we were to seek your assistance in undoing the throne?
She goes from looking at you sidelong to facing you directly. Her expression and body language as open as her regal bearing will allow. And she says, "My elements are not quite so in conflict as you believe. But here is a truth, and you can hear the capital T on it. I exist in the present. It is a part of my nature. Beauty, after all, is fleeting, is it not? But know that whatever may be in store for us, I hold you no ill will. And then with that, she gives a little bit of a bow. What were you going to say?
She's still there.
Okay.
I mean, she may or may not hang around for it, but I want to know what you were going to say.
Lady Cillian, some food for thought for the present and hopefully the future. If you were to turn against the throne, would that not be the deepest and best type of betrayal that you could pursue?
She comes out of her polite bow with a pleased smile, and she says, well, the answer to that question has quite a lot writing on it, doesn't it? I'll let you know if I figure out the answer. And with that, she turns, and by the time she's facing away from you, she's gone. Puff, by this point, is growling. And when the last of Cillian's light fades, Fewa goes, and then sort of shakes her head. Takes a deep breath.
As she is going, but not before she is gone, I would like to use that simple miracle with the 5 penetration for the gift.
And your specific question is how to murder her?
Betrayal.
Interesting. So, your insight here is perhaps not as perfect as it could be because it is a both complex and abstract question, but also because, like, betrayal in this case is a person. So it's like an answer about the abstract concept, which is honestly
I'm asking after the concept and not the embodiment.
Yeah, so it's low on, like...
Because it's easy to body a body.
Right, it's low on practical mechanics, because, of course, Imperators' bodies are their chancels. And so there is perhaps, a version of this type of thing that would be a step-by-step list, and that's not what you get. But what you do get is this. The most effective way to harm a concept like betrayal is to turn it on itself. What would constitute a betrayal of betrayal? Well, it would be something like undoing one. Not like making it right, but making it no longer a betrayal. Exactly what that would entail would be very situational, but
sure. That's functionally what I did with the nettling. So yeah.
Yeah, in a broad scale, the way that you would murder abstractly betrayal would be to not betray it, but have it betray itself. And in this case, just lethally so. The gift won't, in this instance, be able to give you examples of that, but it sort of is an intuition that you have that, like, if you can somehow do the Bugs Bunny thing of turning Elmer Fudd's shotgun, barrel back toward his face, right? But in this abstract way, that would give you at the very least the in that you would need.
Useful.
After she is gone, I will relate this.
I'm going to look around and make sure everyone is mostly okay.
When Ramnet finishes describing his insights, the first thing that happens is that Imbi stands up from where she's been sitting, kind of observing all of this, and sort of looks around at everyone. And then looks
I will
over
wave
at
sort of weakly at her.
Ramnet, and she sort of gives a little finger wave. And takes a deep breath, opens her mouth and says, "It doesn't sound easy."
That's very much an in-character squeeze.
It won't be.
She nods. She sort of sighs. And she says,
will continuing with our hand language continue to be useful or no?
She sort of shrugs one shoulder and she says, probably, sometimes.
Okay.
It's nice to be able to talk again. Thank you. She sort of looks around at Boar and then over at Fewa as she says thank you. And she sort of sighs and she goes, I want to help, but it's hard knowing that even if I do, it won't exactly put things back like they were before I turned into a monster back in Kilata. Thank you for your help, though, and I hope I've been helpful in turn.
You've been so helpful.
You have. And also, you've been a friend.
Yeah.
And it is
and that
an
is
enormous
frankly
pleasure.
more important.
It is a relief and a pleasure to hear your voice.
Yeah.
My lady, my sister?
Yeah, about that sister thing. I can't call myself your jokingly call myself your aunt anymore.
She sort of
still
chuckles.
A familial relation.
She goes, well, I've always been an only child, but I guess that this is the strangest way in which that could change. And then she sort of blinks and she says, yeah, I really wouldn't have talked that way before all this. And then she sort of looks around and she sees where Apatia has been sort of sitting kind of listlessly this whole time. And she walks over to Apatia, and as she gets close, Apatia sort of turns her head to look at MB and sort of stands up a little bit unsteadily, kind of looking around. Apatia looks pretty bedraggled, right? You pulled her off the bottom of the ocean, and then she had this really intense sort of hour or so and got her heart eaten. And
like you do.
Mm-hmm.
She sort of takes a deep breath and she reaches out and sort of rests her open hand on top of Imbi's head and kind of smiles at her fangily and says, thank you. And then takes a deep breath and turns toward Leorian, and it looks like she wants to prostrate herself but holds herself back. She just kind of like gives a like kind of cringing bow of the head, and she says, I'm very sorry that I bit you. I hope you're okay.
I seem to be fine, and I don't hold it against you. Should I expect any lingering effects?
Well, if you're not dizzy or cold, then I think you'll probably be okay.
As she says that, I mutter, not in my experience.
She sort of looks off to one side and says, I'm starting to get the feeling that people find this a strange compliment, but you're
Okay, for the first time ever, does his peanut gallery isms landed a body blow.
Apatia sort of has given her apology and everything, and then her eyes kind of by stages move over to where Liz is, and she says, I don't really have a right to ask it of anyone, but well, it would help me quite a bit if someone was willing to give some blood. I would perk up rather faster.
Hold my arm out before she has a chance to finish her statement, and then realize you'll have to make sure that I still have blood.
She cocks her head a little bit and sort of gives you a tentative smile and says, I think I can figure it out, at least.
At this point, Adam,
mm-hmm.
It may be worthwhile to check in on what the state of our physical damage trackers is.
Yeah, I have specifically not been doing that because the only person who took like damage was Leorian, and we kind of rolled on past it. But we will check in on it
at an opportune time
in just a moment. Yes, I think it is appropriate for you to bring it up, but I'm going to defer it for another few moments.
Fair.
Apatia, for her part, sort of, you have extended your arm and she sort of takes your hand, but moves closer, and sort of, is like looking to you for assent here as she draws her mouth closer and closer to sort of like one side of your throat.
Yeah.
And she gives you sort of like a small kiss, and then takes a deep breath and says, "Oh yes, there is blood there," and then bites in and gets some, not a lot. She only takes 2 really good pulls, and then as she sort of pulls away, you can actually feel the little itching as the punctures kind of seal back up, and she very daintily sort of like licks her lips and kind of cleans her mouth so that it's not around, and you can watch color, as much of it as is ever in her complexion, sort of like floods back in, and she sort of sighs and kind of rolls back. And to remind everybody, our listeners especially, Apatia does not have eyeballs anymore. Her eye sockets look out on a strange night sky, and when she moves them, the view across that night sky pans. So it is an interesting thing to watch her expressions change, to be sure. But as she sort of like tilts her head back and takes a deep breath, there's like a ripple in the air around her, and she sort of sweeps the headpiece, not quite a wimple, but kind of like a wimple, of her starry habit, like off of her head, and it just sort of dissolves before it hits the ground. I don't actually remember. I think we've seen Apatia without head covering before when she was going into combat. But sort of to refresh our memory, she has sort of like relatively messy, medium short, dark hair that is sort of very hat hair like, and she sort of like runs a hand through it, and as her headpiece falls to the ground, the ripple sort of passes along her body as she drops it. Like as it falls, it tracks with this ripple, and her sort of confining starry habit or robe kind of shifts in a heat haze as this ripple passes through it into I'm going to call it improbable garment. It is kind of from her collarbone all the way down to just before her wrists and all the way down to just before her ankles. And it is an immense number of drapes and scarves in a darker kind of nothing black, and with just the barest hint of blue, and just the suggestion of kind of like a sparkle, as though it is intermittently glossy rather than embroidered stars in it. And she kind of gives a little bit of a start as this change in aspect finishes, and doesn't seem to know what to say. She just kind of looks around and then looks up at Lissa with a sort of questioning attitude.
Well, if I still had a pulse, I think it just stopped again.
Apatia does something you have seldom heard. She giggles. She seems to be in much better spirits after both having had some of your blood, Lissa, and also having sort of seen this abrupt visual sign of her change in allegiance. And now when she moves, there's sort of like this swishing and in some cases like billowing darkness around her from these, sort of draping scarves and cloths and things that make up her outfit now. And it is at least for Lissa, fairly hypnotic effect.
Mm-hmm.
A moment's silence is broken by Imbi going, well, I want a new outfit. Imbi, for the record, has basically been wearing the clothes that you saw her in Kilata. She has, appeared as essentially commoner child number C for the entirety of this.
I think, Imbi, that Apatia's new regalia is of similar consequence as you speaking.
She nods, looking a little bit glum and more childlike than you've seen her before. And she says, yeah, I suppose that's fair.
But there's nothing stopping you from new clothes.
I don't quite look at Envy as I say this, but I say, I'll buy.
Imbi smiles and she says, thanks, Aunt. Thanks, Lissa.
While we're on the topic of commerce, and since I do find myself back in possession of two spirit, how's Croesus doing?
Do you want to pop in on him?
Not so much pop in as just sort of like, is he there? Or is he dead?
Croesus is there.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would have been happy with either answer, to be fair, given that it's Croesus.
Sure, but he is there.
Am I aware that you're doing this?
Probably not.
Okay.
Fewa has been sort of quiet and contemplative this whole time. She abruptly sort of turns to face everybody and says, well, that could have gone worse. I will be in touch. You know how to get a hold of me. But I fear that things are going to start happening rapidly. And
is there anything we can do to help you?
She sort of looks around and then sighs and says, perhaps, but none of you are of any use right now. You're far too
vulnerable.
Taxed. You need to recover your strength. Start cults. If you haven't already.
Out of character, I have.
How much in-character reaction do you give to that remark in the moment there, like in the second or so after she says it?
That breaks my attention from Apatia, and I guffaw.
I suppose that it may be time to visit some of my erstwhile friends.
Feywood nods seriously and she says, as Nobilis and of abstractions, I get power from people trading and buying and selling, commerce, and from the existence of deserts, among other things. You need to try and cultivate worship rapidly if you can. That will help you to recharge your batteries faster. She doesn't say batteries. Batteries don't exist. That will help you to refill your reserves faster.
Refill your coffers.
Yeah.
I say...
I like the idea of Fewa creating batteries.
I just invented batteries. Hold on, no time to explain. I say, well, for my part, I am one, perhaps two steps ahead. I am not the aforementioned high priestess, but my sister, a very talented musician and communicator, and you'd all like her. She has volunteered to play this role. I think that she can spread, as it were, the good word.
Fewa nods and says, good, that's a start. But Yes, you'll need a way to recharge pretty quickly. Nettling is certainly very expedient, but as we've seen, it can be a lot of work. And you'll need it fast. So I'm going to go tend to my sources of power. You tend to yours while we have a brief reprieve. Whether or not Celiand is an implacable foe or simply an inconvenience remains to be seen.
She basically said she was an opportunist.
Yes. Feywa looks grim at this.
Do you know
And
how she managed to kill so many gods with such expediency? And I imagine at this point I elaborate a bit on my adventures with reaching out to Mott.
she says, well, that is interesting. I don't have too much insight, unfortunately. As you know, I don't follow the same trajectory as most of my Imperator brethren, but, well, I don't know who all she may have killed, which means I don't know what additional shards she might have picked up. And so a simple exercise of force from one Imperator to another, exercised correctly and precisely, can be fatal, or at the very least, the next thing to it. But I suspect that she has somewhere picked up a domain that expedites the process. I would also, and her eyes drift to Ramnet, I would also suspect that she is once again in possession of sacrifice. So
Yes.
now she probably does not need to use other expedients quite so much.
And the Forge in Darkness, I imagine, too.
There's no way of knowing exactly. I am given to understand that Dask did not get all of Palaran's portfolio, but merely parts of it. That could be the case for Celiand as well, but it is hard to tell without her owning up to it.
You
Suffice
said
to say,
force. So it takes a god to kill a god?
oh, manifestly not. Dask managed it on Palaran. But it takes a tremendous exercise of miraculous energy to truly kill an Imperator. And Imperators themselves have the best opportunities to marshal that force.
Exercise that.
And it would seem that Celiand has more of that power at her disposal than any other single Imperator currently. We can be fairly certain that she has some or all of Mott's power, some or all of Nareem's power, some or all of Zalaban's power, some or all of Nyx's power, and has recovered most of what she lost in the Godswoods. So she is a force to be reckoned with. It comforts me somewhat that she is not devoted in principle to seeking mastery over the cosmos and soul godhood, but, well, as you said, she is an opportunist, and few things provide as many opportunities as a war. However, the roster seems to be running rather thin. I don't actually know how many
Who
Imperators are
remains
left.
for there to be a war? Does Sirtha?
I don't know. I hope so.
Dagoon remains.
Certainly, Dagoon is still around. I'm still here. Dask is still here. Beyond that, well, I hope that the roster is greater than 5. But it might not be. She shakes her head and says, Puff and I are going to attend to our affairs as best we can, but you know how to get in touch with us.
Indeed.
Godspeed.
Give Tohil
She's-
my regards and apologies for losing the Forge.
She nods glumly and says, hopefully we can reclaim it for you, and gives a wry smile and says, Godspeed, and then turns and takes a step and is gone.
Just starting.
So in the
colts.
time between when I was a traveling performer and the time when the Church of the Obsidian God built itself up around me. I was a part of a cult.
So we may not need to start one. That takes one step out of it. We're in we're already one step ahead.
It was a cult to the Obsidian God, and, well, Brother Umber was a heretic, or possibly sees me as a heretic, but, well, I'm the one that ended up with the job with the god, so he can put that in his pipe and smoke it.
I wouldn't worry about him too much as a rival from what I've seen, and furthermore, having a sort of a fixer-upper cult seems more expedient than starting one from foundation.
Sure, the bulk of the cult was Informata, which may be no longer. So, the trick then would be the announcement that Mott is dead and, well, long live murder, ?
At the word murder, you hear and Dosk appears with the comical sort of tableau of Varric, moss beard and all, on his shoulders.
Hey, boss.
And they sort of settle in on the ground, and Varric looks around and goes, "Well, I'll be."
Oh, thank Dusk. I run over as awkwardly as I can, considering my state.
Yeah, you sort of.
Do I feel any better having, yoinked some power?
Your body is still pretty out of gas, but you are not just your body, so the other parts of you are, a little rejuvenated. Not quite to the degree that Apatia having gotten some blood, but, some.
Sure.
Varric sort of stumbles a little bit as he gets off of Dosk's back, and then allows himself to be caught up in Lys's embrace. So, "Aye, lass, well, good to see you two."
Is everyone outside of Fermata okay? Like, what happened? What happened where you were? I need to know. Like, are they fine?
Oh, aye. Everyone seems just fine. The city is rather more real than I think it used to be. Rather suddenly, too, but Rymulus has taken care of those of us outside, and we haven't ventured back in. A little while back, I just collapsed. Not entirely sure what that was about, but your Dosk? And he gestures at the void that is now Dosk, and Dosk sort of sweeps a bow and says, "At your service." He goes, "Right, well, he swooped in and did some sort of something that woke me up, and well, now here we are. Kea and Thad are trying to figure out if it's safe to go into the city, last I saw."
I think we should all go into the city. And I have business at the manifestation.
Oh, aye. Well, I suppose I can be of some help there, then. Particularly if you be needing cider.
I would never be happy to drink your cider.
For meetings, and cider is useful for meetings, and cults are nothing without meetings.
Oh, aye. And then he pauses and goes, "Cults, you say?"
So we
need belief.
Had a change in management. Dosk is now my god, which is weird to say still. But we think Mott is...
And that's just for you.
Yeah, true. I can't even... I'm sorry, that's...
Leorian looks like he would like to climb out of his skin.
Varric. We think that Mott is gone.
Well, that would be something, wouldn't it? I guess, and he runs his hand through his mossy beard and he says, "I guess we'd have no way of knowing, really, without going to the manifestation, so we should probably get back there."
Mm-hmm. Real fast, there's some people that I'd like you to meet.
Oh, aye? And he looks around.
I take a step aside so that my stature does not block his view of Apatia or NB. and introduce them as the nobles of sensation and silence.
He looks suitably impressed and, gives Imbi a very formal shake of the hand, and Apatia a somewhat more courtly sort of like puts his thumb over the back of her hand and then kisses his thumb, in sort of a mock courtly way. Though it doesn't come off as mocking, and they both look pretty amused and, sort of warm about it. He says, well, it's certainly nice to meet your ladyships. I don't know how many demigods and goddesses one's supposed to meet during their life, but I feel rather blessed to have made your acquaintance. And there's a beat where Apatia smiles, and Varric clocks her teeth, but doesn't say anything. And then Imbi goes, why is your beard made of moss? And Varric strokes his beard and goes, I wish I knew, lass, but let me know if you figure it out. Still, rather dashing, isn't it? And she sort of cocks her head and says, well, I suppose it suits you.
She's quite right. You wear it well.
Yeah.
Varric sort of looks over at you and says, oh, thank you, son.
It's growing
Dusk,
on me.
can you put us in the...
Nay, lass, it's growing on me.
Can you put us in Fermata from here?
Dusk sort of, huh? I can put you at the gates, probably. After that, I'll really need to sort of lay low for a bit.
Sure.
But time being of the essence and all, I can put you in the
You be
forecourt.
not what you need to.
He chuckles and sort of takes a deep breath and goes, I hope we all get through this soon. This is still very strange, but I hope I can be of help. And he looks around at everybody and says, ready to travel?
Not sure we're going to get any more ready.
Apatia, for her part, by response, reaches over and grabs Alyssa's hand, and Imbi sort of draws herself up very formally and then nods. And Dusk says, well, I'm always just a prayer away. And then waves his hand, and there is, well, nothing for a moment. And then a clatter of feet on wooden planking as you all are deposited in the foregate town outside of Fermata, the trees towering over you, and a modicum of activity from the light word, surrounding you. Particularly, the first thing you notice, as the last time you were here, is the wind. Nobilis is still in attendance, but does not appear to notice you right away.
Thank heavens. I call out to Realignment.
Do you say anything in particular, just his name?
For now, as relieved as I am to still see him and the light word here, I just produce his name.
Sure. The wind sort of tightens around you, like where it's kind of a strong wind in a wide loop. It sort of like speeds up and gets, more rotary in the area of your group, and you hear his voice says, "Ah, Furious One, welcome back."
Thank you. Had a bit of change in leadership, as I'm sure if you use the site, however that works for you, of course. Use the site to look at me.
Oh, yes. Your resplendence is emptier than ever. And it sounds like a genuine compliment.
I am now a Nobilis of the God of Nothing, but unfortunately that comes with a caveat for you and your God, that as strong as we were and as strong as we were able to display our power, there's a greater threat out there.
She is beauty, she is truth, she is betrayal.
There's a brief pause. Even the wind abates somewhat, and then Rymulus says, "An imperator, then? Well, I suppose that should be interesting. In your absence, I had a visitor. My celestial sister came to speak to me of you. Our imperator is biding time, gathering resources. But we know not his plan."
I believe that we do have an answer for your sister.
Shall I convey it to her, then?
I think that it is possible, given our recent change in employer, but the preservation of our form. To accomplish that, and particularly, it is possible for an imperator to reimagine their new employee. So your sister may never be free from her shard, but she may yet be a child.
Fascinating. You know, I never had a childhood myself. It sounds difficult, but interesting.
You would be a whirlwind of a menace, and it would be a joy to watch from a safe distance.
The laughter howls through the trees around you, and as it subsides, he says, "Well, good to know. I shall relay the message next I speak to her."
And
his voice lowers as much as a whirlwind's voice can lower, and he says, "She and I are in accord that between the two of us, we might attempt to steer our master. We don't know how successful we may be, but neither of us wishes to see any imperator become sole god."
Well, if it helps, it appears that Mott is no longer, and therefore there is no war there for Dagon to pursue.
And nor is Nyx, their ally, any longer in existence.
Further, diplomacy with Sealand is particularly fraught given her last major aspect.
I repeat
Yes.
the list of gods that she has killed.
Yes, I can see how that might be. Well, I will send
Thus,
a carefully tailored message back to my master. And
you may also let your master know that there are a plurality of imperators who do seek to undo the throne and therefore at least stop these wars, if not necessarily the threat of Sealand.
I will do what I can to communicate with him. Of course, at the end of the day, I must do as my master wills, but, well...
Yes, we have recently had a thorough education in that.
But you are so appreciated, and were I capable of giving you a mortal hug, I would. I do a little ghost miracle of fury and a kind of a heat wave of a cyclone of rage, just for their benefit.
You can't shake the feeling, despite there being no sensory indication of this, that Rymulus is blushing. He sort of rapidly acknowledges, "Yes, well, I will do what I can on my end to coordinate this alliance, but who are your companions, these genteel ladies you have brought. Referring to
our most recent additions to the Familia.
Am I still holding Apacia's hand?
Mm-hmm.
I give it a squeeze before saying, they were once Nyx's Nobilis.
Well, I see. It is lovely to make your acquaintance. Lady and lady, of what are you mistresses? And MB pipes up first and says, silence. And Romulus goes, how all-encompassing. And then Apacia gives her sharp-toothed grin and says, sensation. And Romulus goes, I know it in theory. And Apacia's smile sharpens and she says, perhaps if ever we have the leisure, I can introduce you to it more fully. And Romulus laughs, says, oh, my furious queen, you bring me all of the best people. At which Apacia blushes a little bit. And you, before anyone says anything else, hear the rapid pounding of footfalls. Turning back towards the village, you see that Kea is sprinting full bore at you, with Thad about 100 feet behind her jogging. And Moxie just sort of floating just behind Kea's head.
I brace myself for impact. But I think Kea can actually take me off my feet at this point.
This is a very minor point of order. Do you let go of Apacia's hand to try and brace?
No.
Okay. So you sort of hold up one hand, and sure enough, without slowing down at all, she just launches off of one stride towards you. So I'm going to describe a cute thing from real life to try and give this. I was at a wedding just a day or so ago, and the bride has a sort of elementary school age daughter who was the flower girl and kind of in a lot of the ceremony and everything. And at the reception during the first dance, the bride and the groom danced, and then at sort of the bridge in the song they were dancing to, the bride's daughter sprinted across the venue and took a flying leap, and the groom sort of caught her and spun her around and did a little part of the dance with her, and then the daughter danced with her mom, the bride, for the next bit of the song, and then they all sort of danced together for the very end, and it was extraordinarily cute. And that sort of flying leap and spin and twirl is more or less what you get from Kea. It doesn't quite take you off of your feet, but that is partially because you have Apacia to help you stay upright. And having sort of expressed her feelings about your return in this way, Kea latches fairly strongly onto one of your biceps and says, I'm so glad you're back, lady. How are you? You look, well, radiant as ever, but as though you've maybe been through it a little. You're not harmed, are you?
I seem to be okay, circumstances aside. We believe that Mott is no more.
Oh, well, that's big news, isn't it?
It is. That's why I look like I've been through it.
At this point, Thad comes jogging up, only slightly out of breath from trying to keep up with Kea, and says, oh, wow, yeah, no, y'all are all a sight for sore eyes. We're glad you're back. Romulus here has been taking pretty good care of us Lightward, but something big has happened. You say Mott's gone?
Yes.
The monosyllabic answer from Lissa really got me. Apatia extends her hand to Thad and says, "How do you do? I'm Apatia. Who are you?" And Thad looks at her and goes, "Oh, wow. Oh, I'm Thad.
No.
Who are you?"
I interject. I'm pretty sure that one squeak actually caused my mic to peak just now. Yes, it does in the comments. I know if Apatia eats that, I won't have to deal with him again. However,
You'll have to deal with her having eaten him, yes.
Yeah. That is not appetizing.
After all, you don't know where he's been.
Yeah, I interject and quickly introduce Apatia to both of them as the Divine Lady of Sensation.
That introduction causes Kea to smile and blush cutely, and Thad to sort of cock his head and be like when your arm falls asleep, or... And Apatia sort of nods affably and goes, "Well, that too, yeah."
If it is a sensation, she's in charge of it.
That's like, cool.
I give a panicked look to Leorian and Romnet and Kind, which is like the precise expression that someone having run into multiple Tinder dates in the supermarket at the same time would have.
And I just look at you with the smirk of an experienced slut. As if to convey, well, sure, but this is all working out rather nicely, and you're not even having to deal with the one that you had me professionally flirt with.
You took that bullet yourself, for the record. You launched yourself that grenade, no asking. Okay. Anyway, back to the action. Thank you for that.
Granted, exactly. We know why.
By this point, a number of the Lightward have sort of clustered around where you've arrived. And Varric sort of turns and says, "Well, I'm sure we can keep up with the how do you do's inside the city just as well. Suppose these gates lead into the city directly, or are we going to have to do some sort of something or other godly wise to get in?"
I think at this point they
deeply
should
unknown.
A direct.
I'm a world walker. I should know this.
Sure, you sort of take a appraising look, and sure enough, Fermata is entirely in the real world now, ... Or at least half of it is.
Which half do we get? Riotous or quiet?
You'll have to go in to find out.
Part of the city is in the real world. Shall we?
Varric grunts and goes, "I hope it's the good one." And so yeah, you sort of walk towards the gates. This is a silly question perhaps, but how do you enter the city?
I'm still gonna greet the gates for old time's sake. Address the tutelary spirits, but then check in on them. Make sure they're not angered by the loss of their boss, potentially.
So, do you speak out loud, and if so, what do you say?
I don't speak out loud, because that would be weird. There's an audience here. But I do kind of reach out with the miraculous creation of fury and share that particular rage of a shared loss with the gates.
They actually speak audibly in reply.
Ooh.
Oh.
There are 3 very slightly different voices for each of the gateways into the city from this side that speak in perfect unison. And the gates say, and actually, before I tell you their dialogue here, I'm going to ask you for a roll.
Okay.
I'm going to combine 2 stats here. Sense plus knowledge. That's going to be 3 dice from Lissa.
So no matches. Should I? I'm just gonna re-roll this one because I want to know. Actually, will this impede my understanding of what they have to say?
No, you will hear them clearly regardless.
Is this worth a re-roll?
Maybe.
I don't know if you're going to have a better
That's
opportunity
true.
with Lady Luck this session.
Lady Luck, help me out. Still no matches. Highest is an 8.
All right, highest is an 8. You can't shake the feeling that you have heard their voice somewhere before, but it's also strange because it is 3 voices. You're not sure which one is familiar, if all 3 are familiar, or how they're familiar. In any case, they do sort of ring a bell. Kind of like the way that smells trigger sense memories. They're a little unspecific, perhaps. But what they say is, "Welcome back, well-known strangers. Enter. But have a care. Be courteous. Some are rather disoriented." And then all 3 gates swing open.
Thank you, friends. I say this out loud now that I know it's less weird now that the gates are audibly speaking back to me. Did you hear me earlier in a very sort of muffled and distorted way just not even an hour ago?
The gates reply, "We don't know of what you speak. This is the first we've seen of you since last you left, or heard of you for that matter. But you are welcome here.
How do I know
for
your
now?
For now, that's comforting. How do I know your voice?
We couldn't say. This is the first time we've had a voice."
How came you by it?
"Would that we knew, but it is convenient."
Can I roll Sense plus Eerie?
What are you attempting to find out?
If one of the residents of Fermata had miraculously actually
Become a gate.
I'm torn between 2 things. Either I want to know if this is I want to know whose voice this is. So I don't know if I want to find out if it's a resident of Fermata or like I feel like if they had been the recipient of the prayer, the intonation is very different from what I briefly heard. So I want to find out if it is a resident of Fermata, somehow added an extra syllable there, somehow integrated with the gates.
Do go ahead and roll 1 plus a master die, sense plus Eerie.
Okay. 2 5s.
All right. You're pretty sure this is no resident of Fermata that you've encountered's voice or voices.
This is gonna haunt me. I thank the gates again and pass through.
All right. You pass through the gates, and everybody will see this as they enter. The plaza is now kind of... It'd be inaccurate to call it, like, fully a bazaar, but there are, like, people selling things, in this square, and it is festooned in those silvery flowers. There are in a lot of places. the plinth with the statue on it is still there. And the statue itself currently only depicts a pretty anonymous hooded figure. Somebody wearing voluminous robes with a hood that covers their whole face. Like if you look up into the hood, there is no face carved inside it. There's a flat plane of what you assume to be shadow, sort of blocking whatever the face would be. Their posture is one of dignity. They seem to maybe be addressing some people. One of their arms is sort of like across their ribs, just below their pecs, and the other hand is held up, palm outward, open above their head and in front of them. Otherwise, there are a fair few Fermatans, most of whom seem to be as they ever were, pale, exhibiting troglodyte features that aren't usually seen on humans, and otherwise going about their business. A moment's observation seems to confirm to you that this is probably the riotous city that is in the real world here. That these are relatively...
Is there a way to get to the quiet city?
Your eyes immediately dart to the canals, and it seems like they will still lead there, yes.
I breathe a sigh of relief I didn't know I was holding.
I'd like to try going to the quiet city through my house.
Okay. So you just start marching in that direction, or?
Yeah, pretty much.
Do you let anybody know what you're doing, or do you just start walking?
Yeah.
I mentioned that I need some coffee.
That sounds nice. Was the manifestation only in the quiet city, or was it on both sides?
The canals, the plaza, and Romnet's house were the things that were very specifically on both sides.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I like that my house is enumerated among the rest of that list.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, and so like the roads are mostly the same on both sides, and like where buildings are is sort of mostly the same, but which precise buildings and what they house changes. Those are sort of the things that tend to always be like the same in either place as physical locations. So yeah, Romnet says he needs coffee and starts heading toward his house. Unless I hear otherwise, I'm going to assume most everybody falls in. As you pass through the gates on the way into the plaza, you hear Rymulus say, "I will be here awaiting your return. Certainly, I will send word as possible. If I must leave, I will try to let someone in the city know."
You honor us, Rymulus.
Thank you, friend.
The pleasure is mine. As you pass through the gates.
I really like that guy.
And I really like doing his voice. So, Romnet, you march towards your house. You have Leorian, Lissa, Apacia, Imbi, Kea, and Thad in tow.
Lots of coffee to hand out.
So many people who've never experienced coffee.
And in relatively short order, you are on your street heading towards your house when you hear a relatively familiar voice shout out, "Milady! Milady!"
Oh no. I shelter Apacia as best I can. Like if I do my best to put her like between a wall and myself.
Sure enough, Ilona is jogging towards you, waving an arm. And she sort of ambles to a halt a little ways away. And gives a sweeping bow to Lissa and Romnet, and then sort of peers around Lissa to where Apacia is, and then like sort of licks her lips and fidgets with her fingers in front of her like some sort of nervous anime schoolgirl, and says, Well, welcome back, milady and milord. It is good to see you again. Something has happened to the city. And hello again, Lady Apatia.
Yes, it appears that Mott is no more. The only reason any of us are alive is because we had our hearts eaten, just, noble things. So I don't even know if we have, pulses or blood at this point.
Oh.
It's not anything of medical concern. We're obviously in good shape, but it's just trying to bring you up to speed. It's great to see you too. Hashtag just noble things.
Ilona looks a little bit nonplussed and says, "Oh, but my Lady Apatia is just fine, yes?"
Oh no, she joined us. Same thing happened with her god. It's a crazy coincidence, right?
It's going around.
Apatia sort of pops her head out from behind Lissa and says, "Oh, I'm glad you're well, Ilona. It is good to see you again. Have you been well?" And Ilona sort of bobs her head. Oh yes, my lady. I've been well. I've been thinking about you.
I do make space now that Apatia has kind of poked her head around, that if she wants to move forward, she has more than enough space.
Apatia sort of bobs her head a little bit and says, "Well, I do appreciate your help last I was here. If it's not too much trouble," and she sort of glances around at everybody as though looking for approval, and seeing mostly blank looks, goes, "Well, we're trying to start a cult. Would you like to be a cultist?"
We're trying to start a cult. Would you like to be our cultist?
And Ilona sort of looks to either side of her, like maybe somebody else is being addressed here, and then goes, "Oh," and licks her lips again and goes, "Well, for you, Lady Apatia, I'd do just about anything." And Apatia sort of cocks her head and goes, "Oh, well, that's very nice of you, but probably not a great attitude. At any rate,
I give the faintest of, I start to nod and stop myself.
Apatia sort of bobs her head and says, "Well, perhaps you could, and then she pauses and looks over nervously at Alyssa, Romnet, and Leorian and goes, "Drat, what are we the cult of?"
Nothing.
Oh, well, that's easy. Yes. And she turns back to Ilona and says, "If you could, spread the good word of worshiping nothing, that would be immensely helpful. We'll be doing it too, but the more people we have worshiping nothing, the better." And Ilona sort of, you can see the gears turning in her head for a moment.
You remember Dosk?
Oh, yes, my lord. I do. Where is Lord Dosk?
He's a god now.
He has
He's our god now.
He has ascended and taken in the refugee demigods of a number of murdered gods.
Oh, that all sounds rather serious, but if all you need is cultists, well, you can count me among them. And she gives an awkward curtsy.
Wonderful.
This is wonderfully easy.
Did you have others who were looking to form a cult that might be inducted alongside you?
She sort of puffs out her cheeks and goes, "I'll see what I can do. However," and she sort of sways in Apatia's direction and says, "I know of a particularly divine experience that may help to win converts." And Apatia sort of looks left and looks right and goes, Oh, well,
It's an engagement with sensation.
Sorry?
It's an engagement with sensation.
To be fair, it's not Ilona that's consuming anything. And Apatia sort of looks left and right and then looks at Ramnet and says, well, if we're headed to your house, do you have, let's say, a parlor or something where
Yes.
I could entertain Miss Ilona for a moment?
Absolutely.
And she extends her hand to Ilona, who literally skips up and grabs Apatia's hands in both hands, grinning from ear to ear. And you set back off in the direction of Ramnet's house, which is not too far from here. Entering, Ramnet, you sort of point and Apatia peels off with Ilona. And it would appear, whatever else is going on in the meantime, that Apatia has used one hand to cover Ilona's mouth because the sort of awkward moaning sounds are muffled. What did the rest of you get up to? I mean, I assume, Ramnet, you get coffee.
I am desperately in need of a pick-me-up.
I also get coffee.
There is coffee for any who wish it, and we will be taking the remainder of it back to Boar.
Sure. All I require is anyone who's having coffee to tell me whether the amount is best measured in milliliters, ounces, pints, liters, or gallons.
Is Varric still with us?
Yes.
So, milliliters, but I give him a look. And I imagine he produces a flask that I know is on him.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, he does.
I pour ounces in my coffee.
He does the same with his coffee. Kea and Thad both just have basically like espresso shot size cups of coffee. Leorian?
Probably on the order of a pint.
Okay.
And while I ask for it, I ask if Ramnet, do you have any paper that I might take of you?
Likely. Check the office.
Certainly.
Be wary of any pens.
I think I have my own. So I retire. I acquire some coffee, retire to the office, and I seek out some paper.
Yeah, there's plenty.
So I begin making a sort of a hymnal. I try to notate death metal for perhaps the first time in recorded Taraxan history, such that
beautifully timed.
My goal was not to make the Hollyhock God spit water all over his expensive recording setup, but luckily he did not. So
Indeed, I did not.
No thanks to me. So yeah, start putting that together for Firagi and the devotees that will almost certainly soon follow.
Marvelous.
I pour approximately a liter. I drink approximately a pint.
Mm-hmm.
I head remainder in hand, leaving everyone to their devices unless they wish to accompany me.
Sure.
Toward the manifestation.
I follow Ramnet after some hesitation.
Okay. Okay, so Lissa, you're heading with Ramnet toward the manifestation. I guess that leaves Leorian. Are you following them? You are writing hymns, so maybe
I am writing hymns, and I'm probably doing it faster than anyone else could, but I'm still having to like make a low guttural growl and then see if I can match the pitch on my lure. So I'll be a minute.
Okay, all right. Interesting. I'm gonna make some rolls here to see who else maybe sort of comes with.
I would kind of linger and see if Apatia was done with her business, but yeah.
So here's the thing. According to the roll I just made, Apatia is done with her initial interaction with Ilona, but now they are actually fairly deep in the weeds about getting this cult thing started. So they actually will head out at around the same time, but they are
destined elsewhere.
Yeah, kind of undertaking other things.
Okay. I support that.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? According to that second roll, Thad and Kayla are going to go with them. Imbi, however, is going to accompany you.
Oh, yay.
So it's going to be Ramnet, Lissa, and Imbi heading toward the manifestation. While we're at it, though, let me click over to a different character sheet here, and let's see. Leorian, if you would roll a knowledge plus perform music, which is 6 plus an expert die.
I will certainly do so. I'll set the expert die. Since I'm performing music, particularly, the expert die will be set to 6. You know, we live in hope.
We do.
And it's 6 dice, you said, right? The stars are hopefully aligning.
6, and then your expert die added
6
on.
plus,
Yeah.
That brutally comes out to 2 6s. Actually,
oh no!
I mean, what I'll actually take, there are 2 10s, so I'll take those. But
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, you set it up so there was the 6 expert die, the 6 dice, and the 1 6 rolled.
That's true.
There is sort of a meta 666, but I'm not going to use it to increment the counter.
It doesn't increment, but in any case, I got 2 10s, so that's probably sufficient.
Indeed. So yeah, the hymnal that you're writing does not come fast, but you are pretty proud of what you note down. You actually think for a moment, a fleeting moment, that Furagi might actually leave some of these songs as they are. Not all of them, certainly, but some of them she might not even change.
I mean, since I'm the demigod of memes this evening, there's that gif. I believe it's Antonio Banderas being very happy with what he just saw on his laptop. He leans back his head in ecstasy. That's me in this moment.
I am not familiar with that one, so I will have to take your word for it. But
the point is, I'm pleased.
Indeed. And that will take you a little while. In the meantime, the 3 who are heading to the manifestation head to the manifestation. The square by the manifestation has also had a little market spring up in it. Again, not a huge one, but just, a public space, people in it selling things. And there are a number of seated conversations taking place on the steps up to the manifestation. The manifestation itself is exactly the same as it has ever been, but there is a little less metaphysical gravity to it. It doesn't feel quite so much like the fixed point in the universe as it used to. Upon entering, the interior of the manifestation is quiet, but not empty. There are 16 people sitting in the pews, and they seem to mostly be staring around the space somewhat blankly.
Is there still a well? Actually?
Well, the well isn't in the upper levels. You'd have to go in the side door and down a lot of stairs to get there. So you can see that door is still there. But
we'll come back to the staring blankly people as long as Ramnet is comfortable with that.
Oh yeah, no, we're here for the well.
Sure. So you head over to that door and you open it, and it leads to a staircase. Looks about the same as it ever did. And you head down it, and after one flight of exactly 25 steps, you come to a storage cellar.
Can I do a divination to ensure that this is where Mott once was? The origin of the source of fury prior to its re-enlistment.
That's a tough divination, honestly. But here's what I'll say. Using a lesser divination. Well, I mean, I guess you can.
I can do greater divination
for free. Using a greater divination, you kind of understand without any detailed knowledge that that place just isn't anymore. It just, you remember it. It used to be there. The cosmos recognizes that it used to be there, but it just isn't anymore.
Are there echoes of murder here?
Specifically in this storage basement?
Specifically within the manifestation writ broad.
Yeah. Not a lot, not strong, but yeah, there's echoes.
I turned to Ramnut. You found the eye socket. Can you find the well?
I look for similar depressions in reality, I suppose, through the site. This would be a use likely of World Walker.
Indeed. I am going to also ask you to roll Sense plus Eerie, which is an 8 die pool for you.
Yeah, that's not unreasonable or uncharitable. That is a 666 roll.
I sensed it.
Like the man said.
With World Walker and a 666 roll, you... Again, my penchant for describing things via analogy, because that's just genuinely how I think. Yeah, sure, why not? I'll tell a brief story. I was in the Boy Scouts growing up, and we went on a training backpacking trip that was supposed to be about 6 miles. It ended up being about 14 in one day because the trail we were looking at just wasn't marked correctly on the map or in the park. So we actually camped at the end of the road. There was a state highway that turned into a driveway, a gravel driveway with like a gate across it, with a little parking lot right there at the end. And we pitched our tents on the parking lot. And that was the first time I had ever seen the literal end of a road. Like, not a dead end, but like where a road just sort of petered out. That's kind of what this staircase is. It did used to lead somewhere, but that somewhere to echo some Silent Hill prose is gone now.
Okay. So there's a there that was there and is not, and therefore cannot be world walked.
Yeah, the path now leads here, not there.
I'm still going to try to do what I did in the Gods Woods, and it's great for power, because even though the there that was there is not currently there, my hope is that the heat haze from the fury felt of Mott is still similarly tangible, if not present, enough for me to try to gain power from what was here previously.
Okay.
I, on the other hand, would like to make there be a path there.
All right, well, let's handle that first then.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's far
Maybe
preferable to kind of scraping blindly around a there that is no longer there. If we can make the there now there, the there that was now there.
What do words mean? We don't know either, dear listener.
Just a bunch of sounds people make.
So this isn't really a thing that World Walker... I mean, it's kind of a thing that World Walker does, but it's also not a thing that World Walker does.
And other places that mundane navigation cannot access.
Yeah. With 0 promises.
Yeah.
Roll. Okay, I do like to do this from time to time, even though it's not technically much of a thing. I would like you to roll sorcery plus direction, 2 skills. It's going to come out to your sorcery pool of 2 plus a master die.
It sure will. So the roll itself is a pair of 8s, so that makes 3.
Nicely
3
done.
8s?
Yep.
Okay. You sort of reach your senses out with World Walker. And have you ever heard the phrase, "You can't get there from here"?
Mm-hmm.
Usually in the physical world, that means a cross-country hike.
Or getting across 2 streets in Boston.
I'll take your word for it, having never been.
Can confirm.
That's more or less what your investigation here returns, right? Like, if it was possible to get there, you could get there, but it just isn't.
Sure.
You are not attempting to enter an abandoned building. You are attempting to go to a sunken city, right? Like, whatever was there isn't anymore. It was a metaphysical place to begin with, and metaphysically, it just doesn't exist. So there is neither a metaphysical nor a physical way to get there. It's basically a 404 error.
Are there still eternal deaths in the city?
I'm going to handle that after I handle Robin's thing.
Sure.
So, listen, you
Mhm.
were attempting to scrape or glean power here.
Yeah.
So, you're doing this through the vector of fury. Describe exactly how you are going to do this.
The same method I employed with the previous overgod, because power and fury are residual, and there must have been a simply divine amount of fury here. I think what I did was a divination last time.
Initially, yes. I believe that there was, and I would have to revisit the tapes to be sure of this, also at one juncture, a destruction, of fury that you were essentially consuming it.
Okay.
But the divination was first, so let's go with that major divination of fury.
Yeah.
You cast your mind out and feel for the fury. And you can feel the echoes of a presence of fury, but sort of like if you sit in a chair that was recently vacated, it's still warm.
Mm-hmm.
There used to be that which was fury. However, there isn't that specific instance of fury that you had in the Gods' Woods. Whatever happened here, it doesn't seem that Mott was angry about it. That said, you can still sort of gather some fury into yourself just from the long presence of fury here. And it is invigorating. So, as you draw this fury into yourself, you may choose to restore any 10 temporary miracle points you want, or 1 point of spirit.
1 point of spirit. Thank you.
Certainly. And with that, you're back up to 2.
Thank Dosk.
Imbi has been looking around this storage cellar, and as you sort of wrap up what the two of you have been doing here, she says, "Silence has grown deep here. This is a place of power." And she looks over at Ramnet and says, "Would it be okay for me to,
Take some?
She chuckles and says, "I was going to say, would it be okay for me to live here?"
If this is where you would like to live, I imagine you haven't had that opportunity of choice before, so we could make it into a home for you. We just have to, the gate said that it would be a safe place for now, so I want to make sure you're safe here.
She gives a little bit of a sad smile and says, "I don't think anywhere is going to be safe for very long."
No, but when we do have the luxury of long-term thinking, we should make sure that your place of power is safe.
She nods affably. And she says, "Well, I'm going to see about setting up some place to sleep. This feels cozy." And she walks back up the stairs.
And about the 100 murders? The eternal murders?
Thank you. Casting your mind around, feeling out with murder. The 100 eternal murders are... They are still 100 eternal murders. But they seem to have drifted somewhat.
I would like to absorb them.
Interesting. Okay. Okay. How? Describe to me the miraculous mechanism by which you do this.
I will destroy the eternity of them.
Okay.
Because murder is not eternal. It is just mine.
Okay. So you will enforce a completion upon these murders. Okay.
Yes.
I'm going to call that then I feel like that is more than a lesser creation, but less than a major creation.
I would call it a change.
Yeah, let's go with a lesser change of murder here. That's a level 6 miracle.
Okay.
So that's going to be 2 domain miracle points.
Yep. I will spend that.
Okay. You bring these murders to a close. On the one hand, there is a certain peace in this for both you and the victims of these murders. On the other hand, this fundamentally changes the nature of the chancel as it happens.
It sure do.
Most of Fermata is going to experience this as a low-grade but unusually long earthquake in the very moment. There is a rumble and things shake, a few things fall off of the edges of things. Leorian, you fully ruin a page that you're working on.
Sorry.
Of your hymnal there. And there is a loud, resounding sort of rumble crack from pretty much the entire city. And then your miracle is over. MB, when you emerge from the cellar, I suppose, whenever that happens to be, your realm divine attribute is now 1.
Nice.
It has increased from 0 to 1.
Yay.
So.
Hooray.
That leaves Lissa and Romnet in this storage cellar. Leorian writing his hymnal. The earthquake, the rumble, the crack is over. Is anybody attempting to figure out what all this was?
Yeah.
I try to go out of the manifestation into the quiet city.
Imbi gives you a somewhat disapproving look as you pass through the sort of main sanctum of the manifestation, where she is currently sort of gesturing for the sort of bewildered looking people in the pews to move so that she can rearrange cushions behind the altar. And you step out intending to go to the quiet city, and you feel sort of a metaphysical version of expecting there to be another step down, but you hit the ground instead. There is but one city now. It has grown. Looking out from the steps of the manifestation, you can see this. It is no longer as perfectly dark as it used to be, though the silver limning does persist. And the people moving around seem mildly confused, but are going about their business. You have, in large part, turned Fermata back into an unusual, if mundane city. Maybe not entirely, but in large part. However, this is going to make it harder to navigate because two cities with more or less identical layouts have now sort of been shoved together stickle brick style.
Curse my zero in direction.
Hey, do you think I have any direction? I sure don't.
I will be relying on my 5 dice of sense.
Mm-hmm.
I got one.
I'm going to be real. I didn't realize direction was a stat. I thought that was a joke.
Well, it's not a stat, it's a skill.
It's a skill. Excuse me. It's
Yeah.
I have 2 actually. So
Yeah, it's a sense skill.
Helping us around. Yes. You were totally right.
About finding your way.
We can at least ping Apatia.
True.
Indeed. So yeah, as this proverbial and literal dust settles from this, you can look around what is now a relatively mundane city and attempt to find your way home.
We can also ping Leorian, who we left at your home conveniently.
Indeed, yeah. He can be a nice little homing beacon. However, stepping out onto the steps of the manifestation, because it is no longer this eternal darkness that is not night, you can actually look around just through the branches and trunks of the massive trees that surround the city and take note that it is evidently exactly the same time of day that it was when you first came to the Four Gates settlement. The sun has not moved in the sky one iota. And I think that's where we'll end our session. 'Tis about time.
'Tis about time.
'Tis. I will add only that I've been furiously replacing the page that was lost and have not really gotten curious about why everything was shaking yet. So I'll find out when the listener does.
Indeed. That is a good thing for us to recall. So, as that brings us to as good a stopping point as any this session, that'll conclude it. Thank you for joining us, and I hope our players and our listeners enjoyed it at least as much as I did, and that you'll join us again next time. If you're hearing us now, you probably know where to listen to this, but we can be found, for reference, any place one can listen to podcasts, as well as on the wider web at dicepunks.com and on Twitter as @dicepunks. For the record, we are also working on getting a page live on co-host, so we'll keep you updated as that happens.
Woohoo!
But with that, I think we're ready to say farewell to the kind folks at home. So say goodbye, players.
Thanks for listening. Find your family and no betrayal when you see it.
Thanks for listening, everyone. We appreciate you. And remember that it's sometimes fun to introduce your friends to your other friends.
Thanks for listening, folks. And sometimes you just have to move a city around.
Sometimes. Well,
as the poet once said, desperate but not hopeless, I feel so useless in the murder city. Thank you for tuning in, dear listeners. Stick around through the admin stuff for an ominous prelude from Romnet. The songs in this episode, theme of the Dice Punks and its acoustic version, were written and recorded by the Viscount of Tempo and his element, Drew. Cover art is by Joanne, who has appeared on the podcast now and again. Check out her work around the internet, where she goes by Anything Sows. Site design and graphics for dicepunks.com are by Robin, player behind Lissa and Mavia, Nobilis of Darkness and Fury. Rain and the one-roll engine it runs on were created by Greg Stolze, whose work can be found in a frankly astonishing number of places, but check out gregstolze.com. Nobilis was created by Jenna Caterin Moran. It can be found alongside much of her other work, both tabletop role-playing and otherwise, at afarandsunlessland.wordpress.com. Links to both systems and authors can be found on the Punk Grimoire section of our website, dicepunks.com. Thanks so much for listening. If you liked what you heard, well, it's reward enough on its own, really, but if you're so inclined, you can help us out by rating and reviewing us wherever you listen to us, telling your friends who you think would like us to give us a listen, and even by heading over to our Patreon at patreon.com/dicepunks. We have fun rewards available to backers, including a patron-only Discord and access to the Dice Peaks after show for episodes 1 and following. Regardless, we hope you'll tune in again, and until then, remember, subtlety is for cowards.
Two crows in a fight may be an attempted murder, but it probably takes 5 to be sure. People murder their food, their chances, their siblings, but only the last to seem to be properly within my ambit. If I am to ascend to proper utility, I need to embrace the outer limits of my nature. This is not an attempt to increase the breadth of murder, just the width of my options. The world does not need more murders, it just needs fewer traitors and thrones. I would, in truth, gladly sacrifice murder to take down betrayal, and more to destroy eternity.